now, which allows me to introduce two special people, good friends and associates from Independent Thinking. Steph Davies, who, apart from the work that she's doing in schools, runs her own business called Laughology, working in the world of business. And Laughology is, as the name suggests, it's all about laughter and humour and fun, and how that works in the world of business and how it brings the best out of people. I want to discuss just briefly how and why business can be fun and why it should be, as opposed to just destroying the planet and getting on with it. We'll come back to that. And then also Dave Keeling. Dave's been one of our associates for a long time, back when he was Ginger.
Don't laugh at that. That was a long time ago, right? I'm still moisturising to back off.
Dave is just wonderful. I've seen him so many times work with a group of disaffected year 10s turn up in the hall, wondering what's going on, and within minutes he's not only won them over, he's also won money off them by doing card tricks. He's a stand-up comic. There aren't many. He's actor as well. There aren't many UK soap operas or Christmas adverts he hasn't been in. And really, I want the first question to go to Dave. So we're in the situation, Dave, where we've got we're in a global pandemic. Millions are dead. Millions are ill.
Yeah, Ian, keep it light, mate. Keep it light.
Many more millions have lost their job, and one of those isn't Dominic Cummings. So tell us about laughter.
Well, you've just probably illustrated why it's so important. Is that even in these horrendous times, it's the thing that seems to pull most people through. You know, and I think, you know, there are positives to be seen in this current climate. You've got lions now, jigsaws, mild drinking problems. That's what I've taken from it so far. But I think one of the first things we saw was, especially on social media, was this overactive humour muscle that was being exercised. People were using humour to talk about what was going on, to try and somehow build some resilience in and around it. You know, one of the funniest blokes I've ever known is my Uncle Kev. And he used to run a fire station in Sheffield. And he's like a walking Peter Kay. And he's developed that over years and years and years. He's just seeing some really horrible things. And the only way he found he could process what he was seeing on a daily basis was to find the humour in it and to have those interactions with other human beings and find the humour in the situations. And that allowed him to go out again and again and again. I think what I've seen, especially with the people I've spoken to, that's not just family members, friends, colleagues, but also people in the world of work and education, is that humour seems to be a thing that's bonding people together. So people are having these family Zoom quizzes, but it's a system to get people together to enjoy each other's company. And humour's at the heart of that, because it helps us reframe what's happening in a way that helps us to manage it both mentally, spiritually, physically.
Wow. Okay. I like that. Steph,
yeah.
Before we sort of look at what's going on now and into the future, and from both of you explore laughter and humour within education, from the business point of view, I imagine many people will be surprised that there are companies out there that are called Laughology and that are working in the world of business to encourage the idea of humour and laughter. Well, where did that start, and how's that going?
So my background is stand-up comedy as well. I did stand-up comedy professionally for 10 years, and then I went into psychology. And just to kind of back up what Dave was saying and to carry on from it, and it really does work in business, and this is the reason why, is laughter is one of the most basic forms that we have as human beings as a communicative tool. We have laughter, it's innate. So our sense of humour is learned, and laughter is innate. So it's a communication tool that we've had for many, many years, and it's super, super important. It actually links to a part of the brain, which is our emotional part of the brain. It also links to our memory part of the brain. And like Dave was saying, from a resilience point of view, we know that people with a sense of humour and who are able to laugh, not laugh at a situation, and there is a very, very big difference, but be able to find the funny or find humour or laugh with others, they are more resilient, and you can learn that as a skill. And so when I very first started stand-up comedy, my background in education, to be honest, wasn't great. I'm dyslexic, and so I didn't have a great school experience. I was quite famously expelled from a school, suspended twice. I've actually got a school report that does say Stephanie needs to learn that joking and clowning around is not a career option. It is. But when I very first started doing comedy, it gave me an enormous sense of confidence, but also I wanted to be able to read and write. So my first thing was, when I first started comedy, wow, if someone would have taught me this in school, I would have been absolutely engaged in learning and engaged in reading and writing. So that's what I did first, as I took it into schools. But then off the back of that, and just by accident really, is one of the teachers' husbands worked in Barclays at the time and asked me if I could go in and speak to some of his leadership team about using humour to engage. Now, I was a 23-year-old, had never been in these places before, and I went to meet this chap, had a chat to him, and I said to him, I really don't think I'm your person, because this is not a world that I get and understand, and have you seen my humour? And he was like, yeah, this is why we want you. And so I started doing some research around how humour engages the brain differently and how we think differently, and I know that was definitely my experience. And so I ran these sessions in Barclays with this leadership team, and they absolutely loved it, and I learned so much, and they learned so much. And so that's where my journey started, really. And so I thought I better go back to university and learn something about this. So I realised I'm not thick, I just learn in a really different way. And I went and did a master's in psychology, but with a real focus on humour as a developmental tool and as a psychology. And so humour helps us learn in a way that like no other does, and whether that's as a kid or whether that's as an adult. And in organisations, they are always looking for people to learn, as we are in schools. And Dave will know this because we work together a lot in organisations. As we see in organisations, a lot of people deliver content which is super, super brilliant content, but no one engages with it because it switches people off, it's dull. And so we bring this content to life, we deliver it in a funny way, it's not about telling jokes, but it's just about the way you deliver and the way you bring it to life. And suddenly the brain clicks in. It's also what happens from a neuroscience perspective is when we engage with something that's funny, it creates what I call sticky learning. So the part of the brain that needs information to carry from one side to the other and make that superhighway connection is you've got neurotransmitters, and those neurotransmitters are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. They're released the most when we laugh. So it's like the glue that sticks learning together. So whether you're in the school or in a business, if you can make people laugh while they've got their mouths open, information goes in and it connects into the brain like nothing ever else does. It's that emotional connection.
That's right. I think carrying on from that point, thanks, Steph, for your entire life story, by the way.
I need to work on my media.
I'll never get to speak again. That's ridiculous. I think what me and Steph have both found, because Lapology is it's a great name for a company, but it's a way of pulling people in because they get curious. And I think we've realised that the real world's playfulness. And as Steph says, it's not, people misconstrue it, it's about telling loads of gags. It isn't about gags. It's actually about curiosity. It's about playfulness. It's about asking questions and then playing around with the information that comes out of people's mouths and heads. Because the more questions you ask, the better you get to engage with them. You understand how they think, where they are emotionally, where they're coming from in terms of their upbringings and stuff. So the more we can find out about people, the better we can play with them. And through that, it's sort of like the gags are sort of like the payoff to the playfulness. You know, I think it was Arthur Kessler that said, humour allows human beings to do what they do best, and that's to think. But very often we aren't given space and time in our lives to think. And that's the other parallel between, if you look at any list of what people want in a partner, a friend, a teacher, a colleague, sense of humour is always at the top, because it's one of those attributes that people have that's not only warm, but it's open. And I think, as Steph said, it's a great way to communicate, because the brains do relax. And then once we're relaxed and enjoying ourselves, then we can slip into more difficult, challenging, fundamental information that might not necessarily be well received if everyone just sat there surviving.
Dave, that ties in with one of the questions that's come through. If relationships are at the heart of learning and resilience, does laughter have to be at the heart of close and meaningful, supportive relationships? So I think you've answered that, really, haven't you?
Yes.
Yes, there you go.
Next question.
It works both ways as well. So laughter forms relationships as well, because it was one of the first communications that we ever had. We had it before we even had language. It was there as a way to form connections. So and we find our way in groups through laughter and humour. So the reason why Dave and I kind of connected when we first met is because he made me laugh.
Because we're very lonely, that's why.
Because we realised we're both show-offs. And we just thought, how can we outdo each other? But it forms a social bond, and then it is at the heart of relationships. We know we laugh more when we are with people that we know really, really well. But one of the lovely things about laughter is it's culturally diverse, so it doesn't matter where you are. Not humour's different, but no matter where you are, the sound of laughter is we get no matter where we are. Humour's a bit different.
And I think there's a lovely phrase Victor Borg once said, which is laughter is the shortest distance between two people. It's one of the fastest ways to galvanise a new relationship, especially, or just to reinforce an established relationship. But I think the thing about humour is it's lovely if you can find out, it's lovely to have an idea of your own sense of humour, be able to find out what the sense of humour of somebody else is. But if we can discover a collective sense of humour, then that becomes really powerful, because then we can shift rooms. And I think that's where we found the humour in the work we do. Me and Steph works really effectively, because you can go into a room and a lot of times these people are captive, don't really want to be there. You know, sort of first inset day back in September, you know that feeling, right? Where everyone's just looking for a quick way out. You get them laughing as a group together quickly, and you can shift that room quite powerfully. So at the end of the day, they feel a lot different to who they are and what they think they can do when they came in. I think then it becomes a really powerful tool in education.
So let's go to that inset day in September. And I imagine inset days in September this year will be very different, and we would love to be all back together. But let's go back a million years ago to before COVID. So both of you were doing a lot of work through independent thinking in schools to inset, working with school head teachers conferences, as well as working directly with young people. But when you're working with teachers, and bear in mind that, I don't know, 90% of teachers have probably been told at some point, don't smile till Christmas. And certainly humour, laughter, positive emotions, I don't see them on the list of guidelines coming out from on high about how to deal with kids and behaviour and achievement. And how do you win across to a group of teachers that actually having a laugh will improve results and behaviour?
Well, I'll start by the old classic, if you don't love what you do, why should anybody else? Is quite a good starting point. And the idea that I think if you understand that most people in relationships want to be with people that they feel a connection with, that they feel understood by, that they feel they can enjoy the company of, then I think as a professional in the room, it's a responsibility to make sure that's part of the arsenal. It's not a walking in, doing the Muppet show. It is about a genuine. Okay, yeah, but you put your hand up enough, Muppets. People don't let you in schools anymore. That's the thing. And it's about the responsibility of genuinely wanting to engage with the people in front of you. And acting humour just happens to be part of that kit that you can use to engage as effectively as you can with the people in front of you, and also create an environment where everyone in the room feels relaxed and confident enough to learn, to let the learning process happen, rather than doing what I did most of the time, was sit there panicking I was going to get it wrong. So I just said all sorts.
So are there not teachers who might see it as a sign of weakness, having a laugh?
Yes, and that's why they should go somewhere else. joking. But I don't think it is, because any relationship I would imagine, would normally hold a sense of humour quite high up. That whenever I've been in front of a room, be it with year sixers right up to leadership, do you want to enjoy today? Yes. Okay. Now that might look slightly different to different people, and that's why our job as the facilitators is to play around with that room enough to find out what those different components are, what people are responding to. That's what a good MC will do in a comedy club. They'll be throwing questions out, reading the room, seeing the responses. If it's working, keep going. If it's not, have the confidence and the capacity and the backlog to shift to what you're doing to get the right responses, the right reaction. And right. I think that's important. We've got to connect people with the heart first and then the head.
And I think the important thing to remember is, Dave, we get this a lot in sessions, is people often say, but I'm not funny. And it's not a point of being funny. It's creating space for creativity, for playfulness, for that laughter to happen, and not being scared of it. And going back to your point, Ian, there's a couple of questions I always get asked at business conferences, and it's quite similar to the one that you've just said there, and I often get asked it at school conferences as well. It's in the business world, you know, they love a process, they love a HR process. So they always say, you know, if we bring laughter and humour in, do we need a guide for it? And I'm like, no, we don't, because we know what's right, we know what's wrong. If I'm going to call you a name, I'm going to call you it, whether I use laughter or humour. So if it's offensive, it's offensive, and so that's a no. You know, you don't hide it behind laughter and humour. Let's not have guides. Let's just create a space where people can play is the first thing, and then just building on what Dave said. You know, it's this idea that laughter and humour, it's not something that you do to people. It's something that people experience. And so when we're in a session, for me, the best way to turn around a room and to get a room understanding it is to have them have a learning experience in that room through laughter and humour. And I've gone back to conferences years later. We've had emails into ITL a year after Dave and I, or I've delivered a session to say, we remember Dave, or we remember Steph, or we remember this specific bit of information. And that's a year later. And you're going, well, why have you done that? Well, because I had an emotional connection to it. So people vote with their feet. And that's what we see all the time.
Yeah. And I think if you think about it like this, Ian, as well, is that essentially a joke is a surprise. So you're made to think one thing, and then you get to think about it in a different way. Or as what was it, the idea, by association, the idea of two things coming together in a new way.
Yeah, go that way, and then you go that way.
Yeah, and that's what comedians do brilliantly. Comedians will take two things you already know about, and they'll make a new connection. And that from a laugh point of view, will respond by going, ah, never thought of it like that. In learning, you'll get a little moment of awe and wonder where you just go, oh, I never thought of it like that, or I never thought of myself like that. And I think what me and Steph are doing in the sessions, or what we're attempting to do, is create lots of those moments, little surprises. And that could be with an activity, that could be with a misplaced word, it could be a joke, it could be a bit of audience participation, but we're constantly looking for ways to surprise, to create that reaction. And that reaction is normally either a bit of awe and wonder or a bit of a laugh. And if you're really lucky, both at once. And then you get married.
You talk about, Dave, about always looking, and one of the independent thinking, we do these thinking Saturdays every now and again where we'll look at a theme and we could just get together and talk about it. And one of the most powerful ones I remember was looking at improvised jazz and complexity and stand-up, improvised stand-up, and teaching and learning, and the overlaps between it all. And I still talk to teachers about your classroom is what's called a complex adaptive system, where everything is changing everything else all of the time. And if we understand things like improvised comedy and some of the golden rules of improvised comedy, like use everything, then we're constantly in the flow of the moment, looking for those opportunities, keeping it live, keeping it real. But we're great complex navigators as teachers if we're not sticking to the lesson plan and the script and the menu that we have to do. Just tell us a little bit about the rules of improvised comedy and how it overlaps with teaching, Dave.
Okay, well, for starters, it's good to have a plan because you've got something to go back to, you know. But I think the art of improv really is to go off plan as often as you can. And Steph will tell you that sometimes we'll do it. We'll ask a question. We'll go off into a little improv bit, and you just find yourself in what we call a comedy cul-de-sac, where you think this isn't going anywhere, and then you've got to get out, exit quick. But I think, I mean, Steph will add to this, I know, but the essential rules of improvisation are always take everything on board. Yeah, so it's always yes and, never block anything. Approach everything with 100% sort of investment. To go for it, never apologize for anything you're doing. I think also one of the things I've always tried to do with improv is get used to saying the first thing that comes into your head, because very often your intuitive responses are normally spot on, right? And what we sometimes get educated to do is think of something better, or we edit ourselves so much out of our original answer that there's no resemblance, or we've missed the opportunity. So I think there's a few rules there. Steph, do you want to add a couple more?
Yeah, know you won't ever believe this, Ian and Dave, but I used to constantly self-edit myself, especially at school, because I just wasn't, honestly, I was never confident in, I can't use big words, you know, I don't have big words, they don't store in my head. I actually say that that's my superpower now, so my dyslexia is my superpower, because I simplify everything. But yeah, building on what Dave said, I think one of the things that improv also taught me is this idea to listen well to what's being given to you and build on it, and that there is no wrong answer, and that taking risks is positive. And I think we build this idea in schools that there is only one answer, there's one right answer. And yes, there are certain answers to things, but actually, how do you explore something in the most wonderful way to get to a answer where everybody feels involved? And that is improvisation comedy, where we explore, well, you know, could that be the answer, and why could it be the answer? And actually that's a lovely place to be, because you're being playful and you're encouraging the kids like me who would self-edit and probably wouldn't say, or would then go off and say something completely stupid or act stupid to get sent out because I was embarrassed. So by having this playfulness and this improv, you're allowing anyone to say, well, nothing's off the record, you know, nothing's off here, everything's right. And so it creates a psychological safety. And I know that word's banded around loads, but unless we have that, we are not going to have learning brains. So
no, and we have to. The rules need to be established in an environment of a lesson, you know, because you can't just have a complete free for all. But I think that idea that allowing young people a space and time to not only generate ideas but have the confidence to then express those ideas is a skill, not just for school, but that's life. That's how the world seems to be shifting at the moment. You know, we've got completely unprecedented times. I have no idea what my own daughters are going to be doing in the next 5-10 years, let alone 20-25 years. But I think if they have the confidence to explore their learning, have the confidence to express their thoughts, their feelings and their ideas, and that's a really good platform, I think, for the rest of it, for sure.
Yeah, no, I like that. Confidence has been a word that's been used a lot in these sessions yesterday and today. To what extent are we teaching confidence, developing confidence, and just what a critical life skill confidence is. And I see it in young people, and I see it through their humour. Sometimes it's the only superpower the child has got. And I know we've talked about this before, that it's your humour. You're not necessarily, the child isn't necessarily doing phenomenally well academically, they might not be sporty, but it's the class clown is their superpower, and that's where they draw on their confidence going forward.
Yeah, if you've got the power to be able to flip what's happening to you, look at it in a slightly different way, or laugh about it, that's going to be, not only is that going to be good for your own sense of self-esteem, but you're going to form relationships wherever you go. And I think, again, in a world that's changed so fast, where all the jobs that we used to think were safe and really no longer there, and to be honest with you, the rug's been pulled out from under my kids' feet in the last few months. Their world's completely gone upside down. I think to be able to keep that resilience, but also forge those relationships, that's going to set them up for whatever future we have, be it online or not.
Yeah.
Able to improvise and think through a situation. You know, that's what we've just had to do. All of us, we've just had to improvise. There was no sketch pad for this. There was no plan. We've just all gone.
I want to talk about resilience and stress and humour and bring that all back. But just a couple of things. Just yes, that you don't reject anything. The rules for improv. I just remember in schools when I was a French teacher for a while, and whenever a child would complain, you'd always agree with them. Oh, this is really boring. Yes, I know it is, and let me know when you finish. It's never give them anything to block against. It's just such a powerful. If the child says, "I don't know," say, "Well, what if you did know?"
Yeah, exactly.
Going past their blocks that they're trying to put up, and also this idea about, well, I'm not very funny. The funniest person in a classroom is always going to be a child. No matter even if the teacher is funny, although a lot of teachers aren't as funny as they think they are. There's a whole new world of teacher humour we could explore, a bit like dad humour. But the funniest kid, there will always be a child funny to you in the classroom, if you give them that space and that opportunity. That's something I remember from my teaching days way back. Just going back to, like Steph, you talked about safety, and that's a huge issue now, both physically and mentally. Anxiety levels are sky high, and rightly so. It's not anxiety as in I'm anxious, but there's nothing anxious about. We have every reason to be anxious now. We've been through a lot, and we're going to go through a lot. What is the link? And I'm also aware that you did some work at the Patch Adams Institute. What is the link, psychologically, medically, if you like, between anxiety and resilience and stress and laughter and humour and surviving?
So the way we make sense of the world is based on past thoughts. That's how we make sense of the world. So at the moment, and the simple psychology model is every situation has a thought process which creates a feeling and then a reaction. So it's this kind of loop. It's thought process, feeling and reaction, if you like. And in that thought process bit, what's going on is we're not thinking about reacting to the situation at that moment in time. We're actually thinking about something that's happened before in our memory. So we're very, very rarely, in fact, it's, you know, we just don't do it where we see a situation in its current and pure light. We project onto it how we might have felt previously. Now, the biggest challenge we've got now is we have no understanding of this current situation. We've not got anything to hook it onto. There's nothing in our brain that says, this is how it's going to work out. This is how I've dealt with this before. So even when we have crisis, it's like, you know, sad deaths in the family, we have something there to hook it onto. Now, in that thought process bit, in the same part of the brain sits humour as well. And so what we can do is we can learn to look at life in a different way. And like I said, it's not about laughing at the situation, but what we can do is we can look at behaviours, funny things that happened around that situation. And what that does is it can change the way the brain connects to that situation. So rather than it connecting in an anxious way and it connecting to the amygdala, if you like, the emotional part of the brain where it sends out all these noradrenaline and cortisol to say that we are a threat. If we look at and practice looking at the funny things, behaviours that we did. So one of the funny things, you know, toilet rolls that humans did. And there's lots of other things. If we look for them, we can actually rewire the brain. And we did some research on this about 10 years ago with postnatal depression. So we had some funding to work with women, particularly who had postnatal depression, who had scored low on the what they call the GAD score, which is the general anxiety and depression score. And we ran an 8-week program with them, teaching them. We have a model called Flip It, which I deliver through ITL, which is what I call our humour thinking model. Flip stands for focus, language, imagination and pattern breaking. And I call it Use Humour Toolkit, but within that there's tweaks about how we think. So we ran that over, I think it was a 6-week period, and then we measured them again medically, you know, and their anxiety levels, because the way they viewed the world, the way they'd learned to view the world had changed. So their anxiety levels had changed. Now we have to practice this all the time. It's a form of cognitive therapy, but we can change the brain. And interestingly, about a year ago, a similar piece of research was done by an American university around firefighters and post-traumatic stress disorder. And they found that humour was one of the personalities that made people cope better. But then what they wanted to see is, if you don't have that, can you learn it? And again, they put people through a course similar, and the people who went through the course came out with lower levels of anxiety after going through the course. So we can learn. It's learning to see the world in a different way, or allowing yourself to create hooks onto certain things to help yourself feel better, because we are in control of our thoughts and feelings, but it doesn't sometimes feel like we are, but we can learn that.
And it's having that capacity, isn't it, Steph, to be able to create a space, not a big space, but enough to step back and just go, why am I thinking that thought? Or why am I behaving in this way? Where's that thought or behavior come from? And very often it isn't because of what's happening. It's because of something, you know, I still get sweaty if I see a fraction, and that's because I failed maths GCSEs 30 years ago, but it's still there, and and there's no reason why I couldn't really have just sort of my maths out, but I just never have. So that still comes up. And actually just taking that space to step back and go, oh, it's because I just don't bother with maths, isn't it? It's not because I can't do it. I just don't really bother with it. And being able to sort of interrupt these well-formed habits that we build up over years and years and years of responding exactly the same way to stuff. And humour is one of those ways of just cranking in a bit of space and time. You know, comedy is tragedy plus time. It's the classic. Through a bit of space time, we can look back on something that was horrible, difficult, challenging, and we can either look at it differently, approach it differently, try it again. And it's a really useful cognitive tool.
And it has two forms to it. So as a cognitive tool, it works really well. And then when we actually laugh, it produces these endorphins, these serotonin, which it's like bump starting a car. You know, when we are anxious, when we're depressed, the hormone levels change in the brain. So we're giving it a kickstart. And by doing that, we have this surge, and our brain changes and allows you to look for other things. And one of the things that I really want to stress and say that's super important is we're allowed to laugh at this time. And that's one of the big questions I've been asked is it okay for people to laugh at this time? Absolutely. It's part of our human psyche, it's part of our makeup, and it's so important. And for children, I would urge you to create that time for laughter. It's going to be the one thing that really builds them up after this time.
Well, was going to be one of my questions. So for teachers who are now thinking about whether it's a primary level going back very soon, secondary level possibly going back a few weeks after that, or maybe later, who knows, it could change. Whether advice is the right word, but how would you, if you were the class teacher, day 1, day 2, day 3, where would you fit humour into this? That's a question for both of you.
Well, okay, for me personally, it would be straight in with questions. What has been going? What have you been up to? What have you done that you didn't think you would be doing? Because, you know, everyone started lockdown, didn't they? Going, I'm going to learn Spanish. I'm going to pick up a violin. You know, everyone was setting themselves these massive challenges. Learn to play the drums that aren't really there. Yeah, it's a green screen. And I'd ask some questions, like I would do if they come off the back of any sort of sabbatical. Go, what have you been up to? What's been going on? And just get into their heads again and finding out about what these experiences have been like for them, how it made them feel, and we can play around with that. And I think humour will be integral in that we share those stories, those experiences, and that's essentially what a lot of comedians are doing, aren't they? They're just sharing stories, but these stories have been edited into its most finite form to create the punchlines. But actually, storytelling, and when me and Steph work with companies and we're trying to demystify comedy, it is really essentially storytelling and questions. And I think plenty of that early doors, if not all the way through, from my point of view.
We just had a conversation with which involved Howell Roberts, and that was one of the things he said, that similar question going back, if you were in, what would you do? And it was just, well, people have got great stories now, so just tell stories. And I thought that's incredibly powerful. Steph, so if it's your class sitting in front of you?
So playfulness, you know, just encourage children to play and create laughter around that. It's and if they want to talk about COVID and things like that, create space and time for that, and use lots of P4C around it as well, philosophy for kids. But the most important thing is just make that time for fun activities for children. The brain is going to need now lots of nourishment in terms of those positive neurotransmitters, in terms of social development, and just have fun with social distancing. You know, how can we have fun with that and create some games around it? Because when we laugh, we're more likely to experience that behaviour that might feel a bit awkward in a fun way. And I've seen some great ideas on TV, especially from Denmark, where they've created circles, you know, in the playground, and when they blow the whistle, the kids have got to run between the circles.
Or just big inflatable tyres, just inflatable rings, or that, or you use that stick that you use when I come round to your house.
That's not just when you come round to my house, that's just generally when I see you. So have fun with some of the more unusual behaviours, you know, even the washing your hands. There's been loads of funny songs around washing your hands. So, and I think with kids that's really important. From a neuroscience perspective, and you've got Andrew Curran, who's you know, one of the best neuroscientists in terms of child development, he will tell you that missing this amount of school isn't going to make a difference to those children. But what will make a difference is the love, the care, and the laughter that they need for their brains to grow. I know lots of people who have grown up, they've taken a year out of school for whatever reason, and the thing that where they've got to, and they're brilliant entrepreneurs now, is through experiences and through having play and laughter and just giving things a go. So I think it's a really exciting time to be able to tear up the curriculum and say, what else can we do that's a little bit more fun, that helps children and parents? I think that's super important to remember, to feel a little bit safer and relaxed around some of these unusual behaviours that we're going to have to put in place.
Both of you, I know your own school lives you weren't the most successful tools in the academic box.
Rude.
Yeah, you've shone beyond that. I'm thinking about behaviour, because there's pressure on a lot of schools to come down hard on behaviour, and we need to sort that out. And kids have been feral for months doing nothing, so we need to get them straight back in and straight back in their boxes or their booths or whatever it might be. And some teachers might think that the way to counteract that, if they don't feel that's the right thing to do, might be worried about using humour. That would have the complete opposite effect. So what's your experience, Dave, with regard to behaviour and the use of humour in the classroom? And might that be challenged now with everything that's gone on?
I don't know about with everything that's gone on. I think there'll be some people out there psychologically who just want to get straight back to how it was, because that's where they feel safest. You know, I'm hoping that because we've had this enforced break, that the world's going to look at itself quite inwardly and hopefully make some changes. You know, I think, for starters, the fact that both my daughters, one was supposed to do GCSEs, one was supposed to do A-levels, and both aren't doing them now, and they're getting a grade based on their working lessons, their attitude, and all that sort of stuff. I think, you know, there's an area for change. There we go. Actually, let's trust the teachers know how these kids are performing, and that maybe giving them a chance to improve as they go along, or, you know, go back on something if it hasn't worked, so they can incrementally, because that's really how the way the world works. So there's some areas that can be improved there. But I think even a comedy night has structure to it. There's got to be structure. Kids like and feel safe within a structure. But if kids are enjoying themselves in whatever capacity that is, whether they're just genuinely intrigued by what's been going on in the classroom, they've got an emotional hook into it, it's particularly prevalent to them in their life, or it's funny, I've always found behaviour takes care of itself. I think it's only when a kid doesn't understand why they're in the room, doesn't know what's going on, doesn't feel a part of it, isn't enjoying it, that's when I tend to find the behaviour starts to go wonky. So I think I would argue, again, even more than ever, humour, storytelling, relationships has to be the starting point for when we go back to rebuild this area, this place where people feel safe enough to engage with the learning and not just sit there and survive it like a lot of them used to.
Wow. And so, Steph, same for you. If you said that you were expelled, excluded, kicked out. If humour had been a part of the classrooms that you'd been expelled from, would that have helped?
I know it would. I had a brilliant teacher called Mr. Clark. There's a few teachers that stand out. And if anybody knows Mr. Clark on the Isle of Man, I don't know if he's retired now, I'd just love to say hi to him and say thank you, because he was just brilliant. And is one of the classes that I just remember really flourishing and engaging with. And I used to love going there. And then there's a couple of classes, I won't name the teachers, which they were just humourless, and they're the ones I just couldn't connect with. So, you know, I think humour, it's not a thing that causes negative behaviour. I actually think it will cause more positive behaviour than anything. And going back to that point, don't be scared of using it. And always remember, and I know this is really hard in the moment, and I've taught in EBD schools myself, so I understand how hard it is, that behaviour is purely an output of a way a child is expressing themselves, because they don't know another way to say, or they don't know what's going on themselves. So their behaviour is an output of that. So we are going to see a lot of challenging, unusual behaviours with children. I think you're right, Ian. I think we are going to see that. And I think we've got smaller classes, so we've got an advantage to be able to manage that a little bit better, but also, you know, plan for some of that as well. And humour is a great distraction. We know that, but you can't laugh and be angry at the same time. You can't laugh and be upset at the same time. The brain doesn't compute. So, you know, it's a great distraction for those behaviours.
Yeah.
And failing all of that, just whack on Shrek and leave.
Don't type whack on Shrek into Google. That's probably not a good thing to be doing.
I did, and had the police round, and they were the first familiar faces I'd seen in weeks. So there's always a positive, I think, is the answer.
A couple of questions come through. Somebody's asking, love the link to laughter, fun, games, resetting, recovery. Is there any readily accessible information to share with colleagues? What can we signpost them towards? I know, Dave, your little book of laughter, or what was Little Book of Laughter, has just been republished and redone as Independent Thinking on Laughter, which is on the independentpress.com website. Currently 30% off the physical book if you use the code CPD30 at checkout, 50% off the ebook if you use the code VAT50 at checkout, because they're just not VAT off ebooks, so now we can make them a little bit cheaper. So that's there. And Steph has a book, the Laughology book, which is published by Crown House. Apart from your two, where else would you point people to who are saying, in this new world of education, we're going to use humour and laughter as a way of building connection and relationships and curiosity and wonder going forward? Where would you point schools to?
Okay, I would look at, okay, so it's a couple of things. One, Darren Brown wrote a book called Happy, which is quite interesting because it's more about death than it is about happiness, but actually it's about making sure you make the most of what we have now, as opposed to worrying about it when you're not here anymore. But it's a really interesting where he learns a lot from the ancient Greeks in terms of how happiness is formulated, where it comes from, what it means. So that's a nice way of looking at it. And also, just for a good idea of how you can put across really intellectual stuff, but in a funny way, I'd recommend a podcast called The Infinite Monkey Cage, which is Robin Ince, comedian, Brian Cox, astrophysicist. Every week have a panel of experts. These will be probably high, lecturers from universities in some incredible spheres, and a couple of comedians, and they'll talk through some really interesting topics, and they'll make stuff that's really intellectual but really accessible and in a fun way. And I think that's a really nice way of looking at how humour can be threaded through some really interesting complex concepts.
We talk
for
about
learning context.
Make them laugh, and while they're laughing, you sort of shoving ideas in, aren't you? Opened up
That's right. Yeah.
You don't even know. And I'll tell you what we'll do, Ian, if you like, and we can have a chat about this afterwards, because I know it's not something we've chatted through. Some of our Happy Centred School content we'll make free and available, especially the coping skills stuff, which is how to bring coping skills to life in a fun and a positive way. So maybe we make that free just through some of the ITL stuff.
That'd be lovely. Yeah, thank you for that. There's so much really powerful stuff, and the work that you do around the happy schools. I don't know what's going to happen about it this year, but the competition that you have, which are the happiest school, happiest people in the school. It's just there's such wonderful events and a real focus on happiness. We've got 9 minutes. What if we're saying, somebody watching this either live or seeing the recording of it? Okay, we want to embrace. As a school, we want to embrace laughter and humour. We haven't done it before, but we understand the importance of it now because of the changes, because of everything. Where do we start? Not necessarily with the resources, but where do we start? What would you tell the head teacher as a good place to start with his staff or her staff?
Okay.
Go on, Dave. Go on.
No, go. No, you first. No, go on. All right. Now, do you know what? I'll always never underestimate the room. So I would say to the head, okay, who's your funniest teacher? Who are a few of your funniest kids? And I get them and have a conversation with them first. So I'd look for the skills that we've already got. And there will be, as you've already said, there's always a funny kid in every classroom. And they might not even know they're funny. And then there'll be a teacher that will be using humour. There's always at least one. So I'd start with that conversation first. And then I'd probably look to get somebody in, like myself or Steph, to actually... but actually get past that idea that they've got to be stand-up comedians, which is where most people's thought process is, and actually show them what goes all behind that and some of the tips and tricks, just to demystify it, I think, really, because a lot of people, even now, stand-up comedy is most people's worst nightmare, and that's not what we're really talking about, is it, Steph?
No, not at all. So yeah, building on what Dave said, so I had to do some discussion points in school just about what is laughter and what is humour, and talk about kind humour as well. I think that's super important. So especially with young people, that, you know, what's kind humour and what's not kind humour. As adults we get it, but as children we might not. So I'd start from that point of view. And in a classroom, I'd love to see in every single classroom a comedy corner. And a comedy corner is just somewhere that has a mic and a stand on it. And if they're studying Henry VIII or whatever it is, you know, ask them to write a joke, or say to them, what would Henry VIII order if he went to McDonald's? And they have to go up onto the mic, comedy corner, and say, you know, what is it that they ordered and why? And that would be brilliant. And even for the quieter ones, you know, they can write their jokes down and they can stick it up on the wall, so they don't necessarily have to present it. But a comedy corner in every single classroom. And one of the top tips is, what I say is, start on a Monday. On a Friday, make sure that you say to all your teachers, okay, we're looking for you to look for what are the funniest moments over the weekend, or the funniest thing that you hear. And then on a Monday, you give a prize for that, because what that does is it then starts the Monday on a positive. Because I do hear in schools a lot of people going, oh, Monday morning, and not just schools and workplaces. But what that does is people then look forward to coming to the Monday morning. You can even do it with children as well, and create what I call your humour bank book as well. And your humour bank is like a normal bank. The more you put in it, the more you can take out. Schools are brilliantly funny places. You've got children, you've got parents, you've got teachers all doing and saying things that are funny. If you hear something or see something, write it down somewhere, you know, that's a safe place where someone's not going to get hold of it. But then if you're not having a great day, you can go and have a look through that, and just remembering moments of laughter creates the same impact as when we actually laugh. So humour book, comedy corner, and have a look at what laughter and humour is.
I said to people that I wouldn't look at the chat, but one caught my eye. So I'm looking at it now, and somebody, Claire, had written, we had a teacher die on our premises last year, and then she wrote, sorry, sent too early, which I thought was maybe an epitaph. But then she's added to it, we had Dave in for training by coincidence, and initially people thought it would be disrespectful, but it was a brilliant way of uniting our team again through humour. I think that's lovely. Dave, do you remember? And I was going to talk.
I do remember Auntie Claire. I do remember.
How?
No, I haven't paid any family members for that.
How do you remember that? Because we've had it a few times with other associates as well, where they've been doing the inset, or I remember doing one with a group of students once in Doncaster, and before you go on, it's like, I have to tell you that you know, so and so has died. Anyway, on to Dave to make you laugh. How do you deal with that?
No, yeah, I remember Liverpool year 10s had a whole year 10 assembly on the Holocaust, and then the teacher went, and now Dave's here all day to motivate you. Where you go, Dave? That was a tough gig.
Yeah.
Had people crying then. So again, but at that moment, you have to just quickly flip that moment.
Yeah.
So I got them up, got them doing something, so they would forget what was going on before, create a bit of a diversion, check out who's all right, who isn't, and then back into it. But you had to get in there fast and quick.
It just reminded me of when I did up in Durham, I think it was, and the day before, one of the deputies had passed away, but they still wanted to do it as a twilight session, and you do have to judge the room well, but the laughter is a release.
Of course it is.
It's
not always from the mouth if you laugh lots.
Well.
Are you sponsored by Tenor Lady?
Right now.
But it is this, when everything's built up, and there's a release, and that releases all the endorphins as well as whatever bodily fluids might be released at the same time.
We get this a lot. I've had ones where they've gone, someone introduced me by saying, I've heard he's funny, let's find out. And then you go, oh no, that's the worst you can say.
There's another one just come through. I delivered a session after a CEO announced redundancies, and now over to Gavin.
That's horrible. That's horrible.
I was actually in France when the bombings happened, and I was doing a business conference the next day, and I didn't realise what had gone on. I just had all these texts from my dad because I was in the hotel room, and I was like, "Where are you? What are you doing?" Turn the TV on and realised what had happened. And the conference people got in touch, and I actually didn't think that they would go ahead with the conference the next day, but all the delegates had arrived at the hotel, so they decided to go ahead, and I was the opening speaker. And I'll be honest with you, I was like, what am I going to do with this? And I positioned it as, look, these times resilience is the most important thing, and so we're going to look at resilience as a toolkit. And the amount of people after that who came over and just said, like with Dave's experience, the timing was perfect. It wasn't bad, because I think it's about how you position it, and that's the most important thing. When you've done this job for a very long time, you've walked into many rooms, haven't you, Dave?
Yeah, I know. And sometimes with my clothes on, and I still get a weird reaction.
You mentioned, Steph, you mentioned timing, which apparently is a secret of good comedy, and which means we've got 1 minute left. So I just need to say to you both, thank you. That was such a fascinating and interesting conversation. I know from the chats that's been going on, the attendees found that useful. We'll put that out online so people can see it as well, just how incredibly powerful humour is and how well modelled it is by the two of you. So thank you for that. Remember, people watching, NHS Relief Project or Winston's Wish or Big Issue or RSPB, carry on the conversation at ITL Worldwide on Twitter, or email, drop me a line, ian@independentthinking.co.uk. Our website is independentthinking.com. There's blogs and more information about Dave and Steph and how to get hold of them on there. Independentthinkingpress.com is all the books, 30% off, 50% off the ebooks. That's all there as well. And thank you to Nina, working in the background, Ninja, as ever. And everybody, thank you ever so much for coming along. Go back into the sunshine, stay safe, and I'll see you all for a pint, I hope, and a hug very, very soon. Thank you.
Love you. Love you, Ian. Love you.